At its peak, New France was a vast territory in North America that stretched from Newfoundland to the Rocky Mountains and from Hudson Bay down to the Gulf of America. This immense territory was divided into 5 main colonies: Canada, Acadia, Newfoundland, Hudson Bay, and Louisiana, encompassing the vast interior of today's United States, including the Mississippi River Valley. However, French settlement was sparse, making New France an enormous zone of influence rather than a densely populated area. New France's government under the French crown consisted of a sovereign council consisting of 3 major officials: a governor-general, an intendant, and a bishop, and a number of minor officials, including 5 councilors, an attorney general, and a clerk. The Sovereign Council was to be the sole governing authority in the colony, and the intermediary between the king in France and his overseas subjects in New France. The Sovereign Council acted as a legislative, administrative, and judicial body. As a legislative or law-making body, the Sovereign Council was given authority to make laws for the colony concerning finance, order, and trade, subject, of course, to amendment and veto by the king. However, major decisions were made in France, and the Sovereign Council, as an administrative body, registered, proclaimed, and enforced the king's edicts. As a judicial body, the Sovereign Council exercised the authority to set up lower courts and to act as a court of appeal. The offices of the 3 major officials in the Sovereign Council also entailed specific duties. The Governor-General, appointed by the king, was the senior official in the colony. As such, he could veto the actions of the other officials, but the governor seldom used this power because he had to account for his actions to the king. The governor was responsible for the defense of the colony and for relations with the Indians and with the English colonies to the south. Next in rank to the king's representative in New France was the bishop. His office was charged with providing for the spiritual needs of the colony and for the evangelization of the natives. For 2 years, the bishop shared with the governor the right to appoint councilors to the Sovereign Council. Although of lesser rank than that of the governor and the bishop, the office of Intendant became the most important in the Sovereign Council. Gradually, the legislative and administrative functions of the Sovereign Council were absorbed by the Intendant, and the Sovereign Council concerned itself primarily with the dispensing of justice. So important did the Intendant become that after 1674, he replaced the governor as the presiding officer of the Sovereign Council. The wide-ranging activities of the Intendant can be gathered from his title: Intendant of Justice, Police, and Finance. There was hardly an aspect of life and activity in the colony that escaped his attention. He was responsible for such matters as law and order, the raising of revenue, expenditures, grants to institutions, regulation of the fur trade, settlement, the land holding system, public works, supplies for the military, and the incoming and outgoing trade. In carrying out this multiplicity of duties, the governor created the important position of captain of militia in each locality to serve as the liaison between the intendant and the habitants. As the business manager of New France, the intendant also sent frequent dispatches to the king reporting on all the affairs of the colony. A fundamental feature of royal government was the centralization and concentration of authority in the hands of the king. This was in accord with the absolutism that had evolved in France and England in the first half of the 17th century. In theory, the king was the state. The authority of the king was so absolute that the affairs of state were conducted without consulting the National Assembly. This parliament, or Estates General, composed of the clergy, nobles, and middle class, was not convened in Paris from 1618 to 1789. It was natural that Louis XIV viewed anything resembling representative institutions in his overseas province with disfavor and suspicion. When Governor Frontenac, upon his arrival in 1672, called together the representatives of the four classes of society to swear allegiance to the king's new representative, he was soundly rebuked by Colbert, who insisted that not only should an Estates General never be convened, but the office of syndic should be suppressed. In a society where a king ruled by divine right, there was no room for representative institutions. Colbert's instructions to Frontenac in 1673 clearly stated this principle: "It is well that each speak for himself and none for all." Although the system was highly authoritarian and centralized, it was neither despotic nor tyrannical. In form, New France had no semblance of representative government, such as an assembly of elected members. But in fact, government was conducted to a large extent with the interests and views of the people in mind. On matters directly affecting the welfare of the people of New France, it became the custom for the governor and intendant to call a general meeting of the populace in order to ascertain its views and wishes as a guide for government policy. Centralization and concentration of authority in the monarch, 3,000 miles removed from New France, tended to break down somewhat because of the slowness of communication. Government was carried on by correspondence, and in the absence of instructions from France, colonial officials were expected to act on their own initiative. For example, the Intendant in 1685, hard-pressed to pay his soldiers because of the lack of French currency, issued the famous card money of New France. Playing cards, stamped with the seal of the governor, became legal currency in New France. The French government was shocked by this measure, but learned of it only after it had been in use for some time. Taking advantage of the distance from the mother country and the slowness of communication, Talon and Frontenac were able to commission La Salle and other coureurs de bois to build inland fur posts, an action contrary to Colbert's compact colony plan. Thus, government, by correspondence, contributed to the frustration of Colbert's mercantilist designs for New France. Paternalism was another outstanding feature of royal government. Every detail of life was regulated. Intendant Talon issued edicts fining unmarried men, fixing the number of bakeries and the cost of bread, offering pensions to fathers of 10 or more children, and even forbidding individuals from going into the woods for more than 24 hours without a permit. The police regulations for the town of Quebec of 1676 dealt with such specifics as weights and measures, plumbing, garbage disposal, fire regulations, butchers, bakers, innkeepers, millers, blasphemy, boat thefts, transportation of goods in boats, vagabonds, weed control, and wandering animals. The Intendant issued an edict in 1706 prohibiting people from leaving church during the sermon, and smoking at the door of the church. The numerous decrees probably resulted from the independence and intractability of the people of New France. But edicts and regulations could not suppress the spirit of independence and initiative of a people living in such close proximity to an untamed and beckoning wilderness.